Welcome back to A Story to Tell on the campus of Dixie State University. Today we're talking again with Dorothy Engelman. Dorothy, how are you?
I'm wonderful. It's always a pleasure to be here, Lane.
I knew you were wonderful, but I just wanted to hear you say it again.
Oh, okay.
What's going on in your life now?
Well, let me see. I think I'm running for office.
Oh no, not again.
Again. I'm running for Utah Senate District 29, which was Steve Urquhart's seat, and he opted not to run for it. And I enjoyed running for office when I ran for the House in 2014, was not successful, but said, you know what, I'm going to give it another shot because I really think that people here in southern Utah are looking for a new voice and some changes in the legislature.
What are your main points?
Well, I looked at the survey that came out from Utah Policy, and also did a random survey on Facebook. And it seems that the people in Utah, and specifically southern Utah, are concerned about healthcare, education, our environment. Partisan politics was something that showed up on both lists. I was a little surprised, but not really. I think it means that they're concerned about the lopsidedness that's going on. We've had 5 plus years of Republican control in this state, and I think that some people are not happy with the direction the state's going and the way that it's spending its money. So those are some of the things. Education, because I'm a teacher, and I look at children as being the infrastructure of the future, that I think that it's important for us to have a good educational structure. And I've also had opportunities to talk with teachers and find out what they need to be more successful in the classroom.
And what is that?
The main thing, and I thought it was interesting, the analogy that one teacher used that I spoke with. And she said, you know, I've been to the doctor's office many, many times. I've sat there, I've listened to the intakes as people come in, talked with other patients, all of those kinds of things. I've done it, hundreds of times. And so I guess maybe that gives me the right to, tell all of those patients in the doctor's room what it is that they should be doing to get healthy. And in many ways, that's what our legislature is telling our teachers. We know better than you do how you should teach your classroom. And that's not true. We don't pay our teachers enough. We don't give them the support they need. And the other thing that they said overwhelmingly was an issue is that the parents are the ones that are running the schools. And as much as parents love children, I'm not sure that that's the best way for a child to get an education.
So what would be the ideal situation?
I think that there needs to be cooperation between parents and students, but people who are trained in education have the ability to reach out and touch individual students. I know as a teacher, I could figure out how this child learned better and help incorporate that in my classroom. It doesn't take, and I don't mean this as put on at all for parents, because many of us are parents, but anybody can be a parent. That doesn't necessarily mean you know how to educate your child in the best way for the future. We can teach our children many, many things, but I think that we really need to leave education to the educators.
I understand there's a shortage of teachers in Utah.
There is, and this unfortunately is not the first time there's been a shortage of teachers. One of the things that the legislature is looking at is enabling people who don't have a teaching certificate or don't have any background in education to become teachers and walk in the classroom and fill those seats. And I'm not sure, again, that that's the best thing. For some classes, it's fine. For a voc ed class, I think someone who's been a welder to walk in and teach welding is a great idea. They may not need all of those educational classes as far as how children learn classroom management, those kinds of things. I think they need some of those, but I can see where someone teaching voc ed might not need to have a full complement of education classes. But someone teaching English or teaching elementary school, I have grave concerns about someone who doesn't have a background in how children learn and how to manage a classroom, being in charge of a classroom.
What needs to be done to solve that shortage problem?
I think there are a couple of things that can be done. One that was mentioned to me yesterday, and I thought it was a great idea, was that we need to encourage more people to go into education by supplementing their studies to be a teacher. If you guarantee, we will pay for your education to become a teacher if you guarantee us a minimum of 5 years in the classroom. I think that we need to encourage people to become teachers and become good teachers. One of the problems that we're facing is that teachers often don't stay in the classroom for more than 5 years. That a beginning teacher, odds on, will not be there 5 years from the time they start teaching. And that needs to change, or you never end up with master teachers.
Why is that? Why do they only stay that long?
That's stuff that we pay our bills with in many cases. In some cases, they're not cut out to be teachers. But in most cases, it's money. Many of our teachers work 2 jobs, sometimes 3. Most of them work during the summer. We're not paying them enough money so that they can support their families and that they can live in the communities in which they're teaching. And this is especially true in higher priced areas. When we look at housing here in St. George, it's difficult for teachers to find housing because of the cost.
How can we fund education that will better support a better education system?
One thing that I espoused last time, and I also believe in this time, is that we need to start looking at taxing extractive industries such as coal. We're one of the few states that doesn't put a tax on the coal that's removed from the state of Utah. And I think that that's someplace that we can look at it. I think the other place is looking at it is the way that our legislature spends money. One of those, tied into coal, is the $54 million that they said, sure, we'll give this to the Port of Oakland so that you can build a deep water port so that we can send coal to China. Oakland, fortunately, said, we don't want your money and we don't want to ship coal. But you take that $54 million and apply it to education, we can start to make a difference that way. And by the way, my opponent said that he thought that the Utah legislature was doing a fine job of the way that they spent their money. That was a quote from him in an article in the Spectrum last week. And I thought that it was interesting that if he thought that the state of Utah's legislature was allotting money in a positive way, I question what it is he's trying to accomplish.
What are some of the other issues you're concerned about?
2 things that I tend to focus on: social issues, and those relate to economic issues. One is pay equity for women. When we look at women in Utah, on average, make 69 cents on a dollar for what men make.
How is that calculated? How is it? Is it comparing the job or comparing just all women to all men?
It's in most cases comparing specific jobs, not always. It depends on there are multiple ways that they use to compile that. But it's a pretty accepted number and comes from several different sources. One of the main differences is that women tend to be in lower paying jobs. Even if it's the same job, women will often start out at a lower rate. And so as a result of that...
I've never experienced that. I'm an old guy. I'm at least 45 years old, and I've never experienced that. Everywhere I've ever been, a woman in the same job would get paid exactly the same.
Okay.
And quite often, they progressed faster than the man.
Okay, and you may have been fortunate, because I don't think that most women find that as the norm. There's a law being introduced now, and I believe it's in a state out east, that says that you can no longer ask what your prior salary was, because often salaries are predicated on, oh, what did they make before, and so we'll offer them maybe a little bit more or the same. By doing that, if a woman has been in a position where she earned less money, she starts out behind that. Statistics show that a woman and a man starting with a bachelor's degree in many positions, the man will start out, and it's not a lot more. It may only be, $300 or $400 more a year. Will start out that much more, but as a result, with increases over the lifetime of that worker, he will still earn $10,000 or $15,000 more than she will, just because of those incremental increases. I think women also have to stand up and say, hey, I'm worth more money. I think that that's part of it, and also go into fields that pay better. look at those science and math fields. You know, don't, not that I have anything, you know, doing hair and doing pedicures and all of those kinds of things is wonderful, and we love service industries, but you can't support a family on that. And it works fine if you're a second income, but you may not always be a second income. You might be the primary income.
I tried doing hair once, and I could never support the family doing hair.
I wouldn't be able to either. Totally. I also think when you ask what else is an issue, another one is our air and water quality. I think our air quality is something down here that we need to pay attention to, that we are sort of a microcosm of the geography in the Salt Lake, the Wasatch Front, with our valleys. And I think that it's time to go ahead and start looking at how we can keep the air clean that we have right now and keep monitoring it, because we're not doing that. And that may involve emissions testing as a preventative measure.
What was that?
Emissions testing. I came from the state of Michigan. We had mandatory emissions testing, and they do have it in the Wasatch Front. I think it's a way of helping keep our air clean. So I think that that's something else that is important. So those are a couple of things. One of my main goals, though, really is to listen to what people think, what people are feeling right now is important to them. Many, many people that I talk to feel that the legislature's not responsible to their needs. When we look at the Department of Alcoholic Beverage Commission, the ABD, I never get the letters right. DABC, thank you. You know, the laws that go along with that.
How should they be changed?
I think that the state should get out of the business. Republicans.
Well, money from that's supposed to go to the schools, isn't it?
Well, it does, but we can still get money from that even if we're not running it. It can still be taxed. The state has consistently done a poor job of doing it. You're not giving the consumers what they want, and as a result of it, not raising the monies that you want. And just the differences. I think it's interesting that you know, you can get a drink in the Salt Lake City airport when you can't get a drink in Salt Lake City, because they're catering to travelers going through, but not.
I thought maybe it was because the airport was a foreign country.
Well, it could be. You know. But I think those are some things that need to change. And also, so many people, especially in southern Utah, are new move-ins in the last 15 years. I know you've been here for, you know, eons and eons and eons. You were here, you know, before I think the Red Cliffs were formed, but
only about a week before.
Only a week before. Okay. And I know that, you know, you're very proud of being from around this area. And I'm going to forget the name of the town that you were born in. Panaca? I
was born in Cedar City.
In Cedar City, but
I was raised in Panaca.
In Panaca.
High school.
Yes.
Panaca, Nevada, the center of the unknown world.
Exactly. You know. But I think that with so many people moving in, that it's time to start looking at sometimes new ideas. And I think that different is not always bad, and I think many times people perceive it that way. And so I think that it's time for a fresh look at things and looking at some other ways that we can fund programs that we need. Social programs are something that we definitely need. Medical care, and expand the money that we give away every year, by not taking Medicaid, for those 140,000 people that need it. You know, they cost us money by us refusing Medicaid.
Why don't we take the money?
Well, I think because it has a gentleman's name attached to it that sounds like Obama. And so people call it Obamacare, and look at that expansion of Medicaid. And as a result of it, you know, we don't want anything to do with the federal government, which I also find very hypocritical, in that Santa Clara just got money from FEMA for their landslide problem. You know, we constantly are getting money from the federal government to help us, but there still is that very underlying dislike of the federal government here in southern Utah. And not being from here, I'm not sure I quite understand it, but it seems like we like the federal government when they're giving us money, and when we get our Social Security checks, and when you and I can go and use our Medicare, and those kinds of things.
I don't do Medicare. You
don't have Medicare? I'm surprised at that. But I think that, we often say, as long as I'm getting something from the government, it's fine. But when the government wants to do something such as regulation, when we look at the EPA, and so many of our legislators at the federal level want to do away with the EPA. When I stop and think about what the air in the Wasatch Front would look like right now without the EPA, there'd be a lot more people who aren't breathing because of the air quality.
I hold my breath when I drive through Salt Lake County.
You must have a great lung capacity.
I just drive fast.
You drive fast, is that what it is? Good. Another thing that I think people have often raised the issue, and I'm running into it right now, running for office, is campaign finance here in the state of Utah.
What should be done to change that?
Well, one, I think there should be some limits on what people can give. The other, and this was a law that I just ran into running this time that was passed, that as a candidate, I can no longer take a cash donation without having the person's name and address, whether that donation be $1 or a $50 bill. It used to be that you could turn in, cash as it was collected at such and such an event and so on. So now when I'm at the fair, and I have a booth at the fair this week, I can't put a jar out and just have people make a donation, a cash
So
donation.
there's no limit. If I give you 50 cents, you've got to put my name.
I have to put your name on it, and I have to know your address to be able to do that. Now, this was changed this year. If you look at how campaigns are financed in this state, you'll find that most Republicans get their money from PACs and businesses. My opponent is no exception on that. He raised close to $27,000 in the last 2 years. Of that, $1,150 came from individuals. So he raised $27,600, only $1,150 came from individuals. When I ran my last race, every single penny I raised came from an individual. And in this case, 99.999% of all the money I've raised has come from individuals. And many of those, not that I'm quite Bernie with the $28 donation, but many of those are small donations. And to say that, I have to have a person who wants to give me $1 for one of my campaign buttons, has to fill out an envelope with their name and address, to me is...
Now, does this apply to checks or cash or just cash?
Cash.
So
Cash.
a
If
check
you write a check, I'm fine. I have to still do their name and address, but in most cases it's there. If I receive any cash that I can't account for, I must donate it to a charity. And my campaign doesn't count as a charity. That was a law that was passed.
Well, you can donate it to my charity.
Okay, the Lane Ronno charity. I would definitely donate it to the Aaron Kimball Memorial Foundation if I had to do that.
Of which you're part of.
Which I'm part of, right.
Big part of.
A big part of. And
tell me about that.
Aaron Kimball Memorial Foundation, we work with survivors of domestic violence and provide both housing and resources for them. We're working very closely with the Dove Center. They're renting some space from us in our building, and we're working with sharing the support of residents. And so it's very exciting. It's also another problem that needs to be addressed in our state. There's a billboard that was put up by the Utah Domestic Violence Coalition that's on I-15 as you're going north towards exit 16 that says #1 in 3. And what it refers to is that 1 in 3 women in Utah will experience domestic violence in her lifetime. That's higher than the national average. Unfortunately, Utah is at the top of many lists that we don't want to be at the top of. And we're at the bottom of lists that we'd rather be at the top of. When I look at another thing that you mentioned, and I sort of traveled away from it, but when we look at Utah as being named the best state to do business, it's a great state if you're the business owner. It's not a great state if you're the worker. St. George came out second from the bottom in pay for a large number of metropolitan areas, and St. George now qualifies for that. But when we look at the pay scale here in southern Utah, it's extremely low. It's no wonder people are working 2 and 3 jobs, or that we have the number of homeless that we have. I also serve on the local homeless coordinating committee, where different groups work together to prioritize who gets placement first. There's less than a 0.1% vacancy in apartment rentals in southern Utah. It's very difficult to find an apartment to live in that's affordable. A 2-bedroom, 2-bath apartment is going for over $800 a month now. It used to be $698 2 years ago.
Is that throughout the state or just here?
Those are the numbers for southern Utah. I don't know if it's as applicable throughout the state, but I know that housing overall has increased. It used to be it's supposed to be a quarter of your income is supposed to go to housing. Now many people, it's approaching half, if not more.
What should be done to solve that problem?
We need to build more affordable housing. That's one of the things that needs to happen. We do have a unit coming that Switchpoint and the City of St. George are working with that will provide lower income housing. People don't want that in their backyard. So it's a matter of getting
Build it
people
in
to
somebody
build it.
else's backyard.
Exactly, it's the whole NIMBY thing, not in my backyard. But we need affordable housing. We need affordable housing, and we need better paying jobs. We need jobs that will pay a living wage so that people can work 40 hours a week, have benefits, and be able to support their families. That's not happening because we look at, we're a great state because there aren't a lot of regulations as far as employment's concerned. And sometimes we need regulations.
What are some that need to be in?
I think that we need to look at, one, paying people more. Yes, that might mean it might cost me a little bit more as a consumer.
Higher minimum wage?
Higher minimum wage. We're still at the national minimum wage. We don't even have our state minimum wage is the national minimum wage.
What is that?
I want to say $7.65 an hour. That's not a lot to live on a week, and especially because many jobs are not 40 hours. Because once they go to 40 hours, or really over 30, over 35, the employer has to pay benefits. They don't want to pay benefits. And so it always seems strange to me that we say that we care for people, we want people to be successful, and yet we don't offer them the ability to do that.
So it's a twofold thing: low wage and low number of hours.
Low number of hours and high housing costs. When you look at retirees moving in, who are moving in with monies that they brought from another state, the market charges what the market will bear. And unfortunately, new houses are running at $250,000. Somebody making $7.65 an hour isn't going to afford that.
What else?
What else? My goodness. Another thing that's troubling, and I spoke with 2 girls yesterday at the fair, 2 young women at the fair who are students at Dixie State where we're taping this. And I asked them what their concerns were. And one of theirs was the high suicide rate in this state with teenagers. And again, that goes back to a social issue as to what is it that we as a society and as a culture are not doing to help those young people who are struggling. And I think that looking at more mental health services, those kinds of things will help. And just understanding and awareness. Education of social concerns is so important, whether it be domestic violence. We don't ignore that loud stereo in the apartment next to us. We'll go over and say, hey, turn down your stereo. But we may ignore that screaming in that apartment because we don't want to get involved. And as a result, someone may end up dead as a result of that. I think that being more aware of what we need to make our citizens healthy, and that's both physically and mentally, is something that the state needs to look at differently versus coal plants, versus lawsuits against the federal government, those kinds of things or message bills. I think that that's a waste of time. There was a message bill that was passed. It was a resolution that was voted upon by most of the Republicans, including my opponent, that said that we should do away with the 17th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
What is that?
Now, somebody of your knowledge should know what that is. I think you're baiting me. Do you know what the 17th Amendment is?
I want you to explain.
Oh, okay. 17th Amendment is the one that gave us direct election of our federal senators. And the Republican legislature, for some reason, decided to take time last year to pass this resolution saying that we should abolish or rescind the 17th Amendment because apparently the citizens in Utah are not smart enough to decide who they want to be their U.S. senator. Maybe that's true given who our U.S. senators are right now, so maybe that would be helpful, except that it would end up that the governor and the legislature would be the ones that appointed, and that sort of makes me a little nervous to think about that.
We got 2 minutes left. What's your final?
Oh my, okay. 2 minutes. One, check out my website, which is electengelman.com. Look for my cute little red car with the eyelashes on. It's floating around town, and take your picture with it. I'm on Facebook. I'm looking for folks to help with my campaign, and I really want to listen to you. So there are many, many ways, social media. My phone number, 435-879-1558. Give me a call. I would love to listen to you. And if you'd like to work on my campaign, give me that. And as always, it's a pleasure to be on A Story to Tell with Lane Rano. It's one of the great opportunities we have in this community to share our thoughts. And so I really appreciate that.
Now, you're not going to tell him I paid you $25 to say that, are you?
I'm not, no, but I'm not going to say that his mother and I share the same first name either. But I would like you to remember Dorothy and clicking my heels, because clicking my red shoes, which I have on right now, will not get me to Salt Lake, but your vote will. I'm unfortunately not quite as lucky as Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz that I can just click my heels and be where I want to be. I need your vote, and this year it counts more than ever. As we know, this is a strange political year.
I won't ask you what you mean by that, but we're out of time. Maybe, thank goodness. We ought to do this again. You can explain what you meant by the strange year.
Oh, the strange year? Okay. I think it has to do with those two folks at the top of the ticket this year.
You're very good.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, Lane.
This is Lane Rano with Dorothy Engelman from the campus of Dixie State University. Thanks for being with us on A Story to Tell.